Let's welcome back our good friend, Rabbi Elchanan Poupko, to the podcast. Rabbi Elchanan is an 11th generation rabbi, renowned teacher and author, esteemed member of the executive committee of the RCA, and he's a really fun guest and a close friend. Rabbi Elchanan, always a privilege.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Okay, absolutely. So let's discuss Uman. There's a lot going on regarding Uman, and of course, Rosh Hashana is quickly approaching. So let's begin with the fact the Ukrainians are supposedly threatening again, as they seem to do every year, to prevent Israelis from visiting on Rosh Hashanah. It seems like there's a lot of political issues involved, as you'd expect. So what is that all about?
So, good question. First of all, regardless of whether you're Israeli or not, Ukraine is in a war, right? You don't need to be following too much news to know that there's a war going on there, a very big war, hundreds of thousands, probably approaching the 1 million people dead. And so no matter where you live, it's not a good idea to go to Uman this year because it's a war zone. There's missiles, there's rockets, there's drones. It's a war zone. So that's just before anything, regardless of where you start from. The Ukrainians have been very angry at Israel for not helping Ukraine enough, and for staying too neutral in the war. No matter how much medical supplies and how much medical hospitals the Israelis open in Ukraine, the Ukrainians are angry at Israel, which I believe is extraordinarily anti-Semitic, because there have been so many other countries that didn't help her, but Ukraine always comes out with these very passionate statements as if Israel owns it, a tremendous hakaras hatov. Now, just for the record, yes, I 100% side with Ukraine in this war. Putin's a terrible guy. That they're against the West. The war of Russia is going to undermine the West. So we need to support Ukraine. But Ukraine has a horrible history of what they have done to Jews. Happens to be my grandmother was born in Berdichev. And, from the pogroms, this is centuries. Ukraine has a city named Khmelnytsky for the guy that led the Tach and Tat pogroms in 1648. They were glad collaborators of the Nazis during the Holocaust when more than 1 million Jews were killed just by bullets. It's called Holocaust by bullets. And so they have a very bad history. So if Israel would even not do anything for them, dayenu, that would be understandable. But Israel has done a lot for them, and they're just constantly putting out statements saying, you have to give us more. So now they have a chap that now that Rosh Hashanah is coming and a lot of people want to go to Uman, basically they've made a statement saying, you won't help us enough with the war, we're not going to let you into Uman, sort of a tit for tat. And so they've been putting out like almost daily statements about this, and it's obviously obnoxious extortion, anti-Semitic, the whole thing.
But Elchanan, tell us how you really feel. No, I'm kidding. But no, but I agree with you on pretty much every point you made. And it's disgraceful, like you said. You know the history, and you know the history. You have this really rich, robust understanding of the history, which I appreciate a lot. And is very, very putting this all in context is huge, because somebody who just sees the headlines and knows what's going on the last 3 months doesn't have that picture, which is crucial to the discussion. But the disgraceful part to me is they, with all the history, and like you said, with the history of anti-Semitism and even modern day, a lot of reports, maybe not as rampant but bad. And then using something totally religious, totally apolitical, and using it as like this tit for tat, as you pointed out, they're leveraging this, which has no connection whatsoever to the whatever they're upset about, which is, like you said, unjustified to begin with. And it's always somehow like the Charedi. Let's get the Charedi story in the narrative in the middle of this, and use that as leverage. It's really.
I don't think they see Charedi or not Charedi. I think even if we all had a big cross on our chest, they wouldn't care. That they're anti-Semitic to the bone. And look, the fact that they just see an opportunity to get at the Jews, they don't care if you're a Breslov or a Litvak or whatever it is. They're saying, okay, you guys have not helped us as much as we want. We're going to use this holy site to get at you, even though they can only say thank you. I mean, Uman for decades already, has been a great source of economic benefit for the Ukrainians. The tens of thousands of tourists, etc. They've only gained from it, but still they use it as a bargaining chip. And it's out the demands they make daily from Israel. Even Zelensky, who's a Jew, has to sometimes go along with it, I think, and constantly make statements. Oh, we're disappointed with Israel. We wish Israel would have done more. Literally, Germany is still buying gas from Russia. Literally, Germany is funding the war against them, but they have nothing to say about Germany. But for some reason, they're always busy with Israel.
Picking on Israel, yeah, and plenty of European, the entire Europe essentially is being fueled, literally, is buying their gas from Putin, making Putin rich. The untold story of this whole bogus war situation going on is that Putin is wealthier than ever because he charges a lot more for natural gas and for oil, and he's basically the biggest source. And you're right, nobody says a word. Other countries, as you say, have not helped Ukraine. Yeah, somehow Israel is always the easy target. So here, and as I understand it, by the way, Jewish Ukrainians are allowed into Israel, and there's no questions asked, and they can stay in Israel permanently. The Ukrainians have an issue with the fact that the Israelis are basically saying non-Jews who have no reason whatsoever to be in Israel versus any other country, after their visa is expired, we're sending them home.
Yeah, look, it's obviously a complicated situation. Obviously, we need the war against Putin to be won. There's no question that we want Ukraine to win. But I think their obsession with Israel, the expectation, I mean, there's the latest big spat they have with Israel is that Israel's not giving healthcare, free healthcare to the Ukrainian refugees, which, you know, I don't get healthcare in America from the government. But look, they have very high expectations, and they show outrage when you don't give them what they want, which is kind of inappropriate because, you know, as they say, beggars can't be choosers. I'm happy for everyone who helps them, but the outrage that they direct at Israel and Jews for not giving them as much as they want is anti-Semitic.
Now, as anti-Semitic, all right, there, that is your clear-cut opinion. I hear that. Now, how do you think this all plays out? I mean, at the end of the day, I'd have to think that it'll get resolved in some way or another, and that the people who want to be in Uman, and the Israelis, the Jews, the Yidden that want to be in Uman, are going to get there.
Not easily, because they are threatening. Israel has a visa exchange program with them. So as of now, if you're an Israeli, you can get into Ukraine without a visa. You just use your Israeli passport. But they can in a second say, okay, if you don't have a visa, then you can't get in. If you have an Israeli passport, you can't get in without special permission. And then it will end up that only Israelis with an American passport will be able to go in. Either way, you shouldn't go there. But look, there's been also a terrible story with what Mayor Porush has been doing. And that is advocating for Berland, who's I don't know what's appropriate for your listeners, so I'm not going to say too much, but the head of the Shuvu Bonim Breslov community, who is very much the powerhouse behind large attendance in Uman, in Miron, in Kever Yosef. He's been in jail for doing horrible things.
Convicted abuser and convicted of assault. We could certainly say that, and that is very public. And yeah, a lot of people, there was a protest, and we'll get to, your thoughts on this, but people, Charedim, I'm talking about, purebred Charedim, find this move very offensive to the abuse victims, essentially, that they would be trying to pull strings with Ukraine, Mayor Porush, to allow Eliezer Berland to visit. So yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, look, Eliezer Berland's appeal, especially to teenagers, is his wild and irresponsible behavior. And so he gets people to go. This past week, a few IDF soldiers were injured in Kever Yosef HaTzadik. So Berland would have his people drive into the Palestinian Authority, into Shechem, near all the terrorists, Hamas, Fatah, and go to Kever Yosef, and very irresponsibly. And the same when you speak about what happened in Miron. A lot of the push to go to Miron has Berland behind it. He also, against the law, there was a specific law made that he shouldn't go to Miron. Somehow he got the political power to go and light some hadlaka in Miron. And so, now with Uman, he wants to go to Uman, even though he's blacklisted. By the way, interestingly, he's blacklisted by Ukraine, I believe, not because of his criminal behavior, but because he sided with Putin and he said Divrei Shevach v'Tehila. I am old enough to remember, by the way, in 9/11, The rumor was that he said that Osama bin Laden, he gave a whole limud zchus on him because he doesn't shave his beard. That's why he added this zchus, some insane type of thing that he said. So yeah, the fact that Mayor Porosh and a Charedi MK, a minister, would advocate for such a criminal is disheartening. We saw the same thing with Litzman advocating for Malka Leifer. And the Charedi community is starting to wake up and say, this does not represent our opinion. Like, why is advocating for criminals a thing?
Exactly. And criminals and criminals who, we're not talking about tax fraud. You're not talking about some kind of financial fraud.
Really,
literally are
Gimel Chamuris
to children and to, very, very innocent, the most weak and powerless victims possibly that you can imagine. And I want to, because number one, like you said, he was banned from Ukraine because he actually said that the reason that Ukraine was invaded is because it came from Shemayim, because they banned him and they banned Shuvu Bonim from Ukraine. So as a punishment, as retribution for that, this is literally what he said, and that's what you got Ukraine upset. Like you said, not the abuse issues and not the convictions, which says a lot about Ukraine in addition to everything else. Again, very sad stuff. And yet, I want to be very clear. We're discussing this sensitive topic with Tayelos Harabim. I almost never get into these types of sensitive issues, except when I see victims who are literally suffering. And yeah, then you have politicians. It's disheartening. I'm not judging the politicians. I understand that they're under a lot of pressure. I understand that they have a lot of calculations.
I am, but
you're welcome to. But for these women and these abusees and these victims, like you said, the Charedi community is waking up and realizing, wait a second. This is not about getting in lockstep and about, supporting, we're not talking about Gedolim. We're not talking about Rabbanim who are doing this. We're talking about politicians. And if the politicians are actually hurting those of our community who they're supposed to be representing and supposed to be supporting, disheartening to say the least.
But by the way, there were plenty of Botei Din and Rabbanim who put out the most horrible kol kairas against Berland. He's a danger to the public. This is not even, he's not even, I wouldn't call him a Rav. He's been banned. He's been, I don't know if it's an absolute cherem or the way we know it classically, but there've been plenty of letters and kol kairas awakening the community to the danger he poses and to the abuses that he does.
Yeah. And yet I have seen, like you said, he's really tapping into a certain desire on the part of innocent Charedi, like you said, teenagers. It's not that these are people who are bad people at all. The opposite. They get kind of sucked in. Like you said, he knows very, unfortunately, very well.
I mean, you can look it up. He has this thing when he drives somewhere. Lechatchila, they drive on like insane speeds. His followers sometimes get an adrenaline rush from him going at 150 miles an hour or whatever it is. Like there's this enjoyment to do dangerous things. And so one of it is going to be to go to Uman. And you cannot forget what happened in Meron, because the professional side of things in Meron said, I think it was 3 years ago when the big Meron tragedy happened, that they shouldn't do it. But again, it was politicians caving into non-professional considerations and saying, okay, let's allow for it. So I think this whole Kvarim rush in general has cost too many lives. And what's bigger than V'nishmartem Moedlen Avshei? Definitely not going to a caver, which you can go to on any other given day. And it's looking like there's also people going now. And Uman's a war zone. Just remember, regardless of any issue, it's a war zone. It's dangerous.
And on that note, that's actually my final question for you. On that note, the fact that it's a war zone, what do you say to people who say, look, Uman is not exactly the center of the war, of the battleground. Uman's 120 or so miles from Kiev. They have been attacked, so I'm not going to say those areas. There actually was a terrible attack in April on Uman specifically, and it could be Khalila, but it could be that it would be on the radar of the Russians. If they know that there's a big event happening there, Chas v'Shalom, Rahman al later. But if somebody says, listen, is it really that much worse than riding a New York City subway? How do you respond to that?
It's a war zone. I mean, it's the State Department has a travel warning for Ukraine, and it's a war zone, right? You wouldn't go to I don't know where else there's a war going on now, but you wouldn't go. I don't know. Syria, you just don't go to a war zone. It's one of those things that if something happened to you, no one would be like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to him." No, everyone would be like, Shoite should not have gone there. And so, yeah, you can make your calculations, but they say about driving that you have to do it, right? That's derech kol haaretz, but you really don't have to go to Uman. It's going out of your way for a sakana. Go to the Koisel Maravi. You can go to Meron on Rosh Hashana. It's safe then. There's plenty of other places to go. There's really no mitzvah to go to a war zone and get yourself killed.
Okay, I completely understand and agree with your points there. Before we let you go, what are we up to these days? You have a podcast?
I do, but I just wanted to add one more thing that's very much of interest. The fact that there's a Charedi protest in front of Mayor Porosh's house, led by an organization of Charedi women. I think that's a very big development. There's this awakening you're seeing in Israel of Charedi women. Charedi women, if they voted alone, have 8 seats in the Knesset, in the Israeli Knesset. If all Charedi women would vote only for this Charedi women party, I think her name is Tzipi Lavi. She's leading it. There's a few others. And it's an emerging force in Israeli politics, the power of Charedi women. And in this case, you for sure need to agree that it's for good. Also, men showed up at the protest, but the fact that they stood up and said enough, and we're not going to let this happen on our watch, I think is good news for Charedi society in Israel.
Absolutely, that's fascinating. That's a great point. Okay, so what are we plugging? What do you have going on?
Thank God, writing a lot, putting out books, always writing a book sometime between everything that's going on, and writing articles and being a Rebbe for 6th grade. That's it.
Yeah, all 6th grade Rebbe. Do you like that?
Yes, fantastic. It's very good. Baruch Hashem.
That'll have to be its own topic one day, because
we can do chinuch tips or whatever it is. I'm happy to.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you so much. Some really, really great observations, insights, and points. As always, you have incredible clarity, and I love your passion around rabbi, teacher, Rebbe, author, and much more. Rabbi Elchanan Poupko on the VIN podcast.
Thank you.